Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the annual meeting of the school board, Monday, July 12th, 2021 at 6 p.m. I'm Terry Brenner, Superintendent of Schools. I'll be presiding over the meeting until our officers are seated. And first of all, we would like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. The flags are over here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And before we get officially started with our board agenda this evening, I would like to introduce our new Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Education, so all board members and all guests in the room know who Dr. Brenda Lewis is. Dr. Lewis hit the ground running on June 29th, even though officially she started on July 1st. And her leadership acumen has been on display already, and we're just thrilled to have Dr. Lewis here. So, Dr. Lewis, welcome. Mr. Berge, would you like to declare the 2021-22 school board, please?
Certainly, Dr. Brenner. Page 2 of the board packet is the memorandum, and I've listed the membership and term of each of the school board members of the Grand Forks Public School District number 1 for the 2021, the 2022 fiscal year. There are no newly elected members this year, and I'll just read through the members and the term expiration. Doug Carpenter, term expires June of 2022. Chris Douthit, June of 2022. Amber Flynn, June of 2024. Jacqueline Hassett, June of 2022. Eric Lunn, June 2024. Jeff Manley, June 2024. Shannon Mikula, June 2022. Bill Palmasino, June of 2022. And Cynthia Schab, June 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Berge. No action is needed on that. Now we will have the election of officers, and we will start with the election of president of the school board. And at this time, I would take nominations for president of the school board. Mr. Carpenter, you are recognized.
I would nominate Eric Lunn.
There's been a nomination for Dr. Eric Lunn.
I'll second that.
There's been a second from Dr. Schab. Are there any other nominations from the board? Are there any other nominations from the board? Are there any other nominations from the board? Dr. Lunn, congratulations. You are the board president. The meeting is yours. Come on over.
Thank you, Dr. Brenner. I got to look at what's next on the agenda, sorry. So now we're going to elect the vice president, and I'll open the floor to nominations. They don't need a second, just a nomination for vice president. Doug?
I would nominate Amber Flynn.
Thank you. Any other nominations for vice president?
Well, I'll second that.
Okay. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, Amber, you're the new vice president. Thank you. So let's move on to item 2, which is approval of the agenda. Dr. Brenner, do you have any changes you need to make to the agenda for tonight's meeting?
No adjustments.
Okay. Can I get a motion and a second?
So moved. Approval of the agenda.
We have a motion by Cynthia and a second by Chris. Any comments or questions? Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 3 is approval of, we have 2 separate minutes. The first one is the minutes of the June 14th meeting. Do we have a motion and a second for approval?
I would move a motion, however, I have an amendment. I was not on the phone. I was
Okay.
present.
Okay, so you want to make that motion with the correction?
Yes, please.
Okay, Doug, is that okay with your second? Okay. Any other corrections to those minutes besides the one made by Cynthia? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. June 28th, meeting minutes for the special meeting we had on the June 28th. Do we have any motions for that? We have a motion by Chris. Do we have a second? Second by Bill. Any additions or corrections to the June 28th meeting minutes? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We're now at item 4, which is citizen comments on non-agenda items, and I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to, are these the non-agenda items? They're all, okay. Okay. Why don't we start with Mary Dietrich? And just as you're coming up, just so you know that with non-agenda items, by law, we can't respond to you. We can listen to you, and then the response will come either at a later meeting or through the superintendent's office. And try and limit your response or your talk to 3 minutes if you can. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you for having me. Some public schools in North Dakota state that critical race theory is not part of the North Dakota K through 12 education content standards from the North Dakota Department of Public Education. So if this is so, why did my friend's third grade student in Grand Forks tell his parents that my teacher said that white people are bad? I guarantee you that at that age, he did not make this up. Many families are mixed race, including mine. So who do these children decide who is good? Is it their mother or father? I believe that he heard this in his classroom. Children are not even aware of skin color at an early age. They are taught to hate each other because of the color of their skin. They are taught to be racist. Where is the easiest place to indoctrinate children but in school? Considering the age that I am, I have witnessed considerable progress in racial issues in the United States. I see men and women of many colors serving our government, our military, and businesses without harassment due to color. How is it that the Nigerian Americans, one of the richest groups in America, have oppressed the black culture? Ty Smith, a black man with 2 medical degrees, wants to know how it is possible that he has been oppressed. If you haven't seen it, you can find him on the internet because his video has gone viral. Now the schools are being taught diversity training, equity, and inclusion trainings. How can this be equitable if our schools are now teaching that one race is an oppressor and the other oppressed? Why are we talking about what happened many years ago when our children play side by side without knowing their skin color is different? The 1619 Project teaches skin color matters. This training is teaching hatred for no good reason other than to destroy Western civilization. How is it possible that Martin Luther King Jr. is considered wrong and naive? Because of this diversity training, children are not learning up to their true potential. Many schools are holding back gifted children, gifted programs are canceled, and this past year has been a challenge to even very good students. A Grand Forks High School student with A's struggled with online learning and did not feel connected. During her senior year, she was told that 43% of the seniors were not on track to graduate. However, most received individual help at community high school and did graduate, but they struggled with depression and the sense of failure. Grand Forks Public Schools receive millions of dollars from the federal government, but as far as I can see, none is designated to programs to help gifted students reach their potential. Students were not at great risk of getting or carrying a virus at 99.97% of people survive when they do get it. But this generation of children has been harmed by fear through masking, fear through indoctrination of hatred of your fellow man because of his skin color, and now we are facing fear of an experimental injection that has possible adverse reactions with consequences unknown for the long term. I would like to see the school boards remove any training of diversity, encourage students to think for themselves, and help them discover their true identities and values and beliefs of their families and communities. There is only one race, the human race, and we are all made in the image of God.
Thank you, Mary. Sarah, I'm going to probably butcher your name. Last name Seblik? You correct me, please.
Sorry about that. I would also like to ask the school board to please address how they will address the critical race theory being allowed in the classrooms as a district as a whole. What things will you allow? What things will you not allow? This is a very hot button topic, and I'm very curious, as are many other people of the community on both sides, wishing to know what kind of curriculum is going to be allowed. What are the things going to be taught to our children? My concern is that it boils down to teaching kids to hate each other, and we're on opposite sides and we're not working together, and I'm really concerned for our children that that's what's going to be taught for them. So I would really like to hear a statement by the school board to see what are you going to allow in the classrooms. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And as I said earlier, we won't be able to respond tonight, but we will respond. Dr. Jean Gullix.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. I am Dr. Jean Gullix, a child development and mental health specialist, family nurse practitioner, and faculty at the UND School of Medicine. Through email, Dr. Brenner told me that the CDC and the North Dakota Public Health Guidelines are what he follows in making decisions regarding policies related to COVID-19, which is a good idea. However, on July 10th, 2021, this past week, CNBC reported that the CDC guidelines create confusion. They have changed again. With the curve, with masks, the curve should have dropped significantly and did not. It climbed higher and higher. Masks may prevent spread of respiratory droplets like a sneeze, but cannot stop a nanovirus. And I'm concerned because of the detrimental effects of masks on the children up till now. Children's lives are being destroyed by fear. Never before in the history of the world have children been given treatments such as masks and shots, for example, that are detrimental to their health to protect adults. The fear of death is only rivaled by the fear of social disapproval. So adults continue to follow the rules so that they are not singled out, even with their children's futures at stake. The lives of children, parents, and teachers are being destroyed by fear. As a specialist, I heard over and over again these greatest fears in kids ages 4 to 18. I'm afraid that grandma will die. I'm afraid that I could kill grandma. They all said grandma. What if I lose my parents? If I say anything at school that I can't breathe or don't feel good because of wearing the mask, I'm afraid I'll be kicked off my team. Parents fear losing their children and are getting ill and dying, leaving their kids without them. Today I saw 3 parents without masks, and their kids all had masks on, and it was 92 degrees and humid outside. They fear being ostracized by the schools or that their children will be shunned if they speak up. Teachers fear that they can't teach to the best of their ability, and the estimate in a poll that was just taken in 2021 is that up to 54% of teachers indicated they're somewhat or very likely to leave their position in the next 2 years. Briefly, I will give you some examples of students who I personally know who have been harmed. And these are students that did not have risk factors up till now. Depression rates are up 85%. From 2018, girls are at the highest risk. I have had 3 students that have been at the ER for self-harm or attempted suicide, and 1 9-year-old who completed a suicide because she was afraid she was going to kill her grandma. Anxiety, which includes PTSD and phobias, have increased 94% after the mask mandate was put in place. I know 2 children who would be in middle school who have not been in school since for about 2 years, so is it 18 months maybe? Students are afraid of the future. They're afraid of going to college. They have fallen off the honor roll and lost scholarships. The national estimate is there's a 12 to 18-month delay in academic achievement as of March 2021. North Dakota, as you know, is near the top of grade schools, so I'm hoping the delay is not that much. scores have dropped 7 points, and with that, ACT and SAT scores continue to drop. Medical conditions occurred in 55% of youth before the pandemic, and now it's up to 75%. The following illnesses are directly related to increase directly related to the masks that are being worn: asthma, upper respiratory infections and lung infections, strep throats and staph infections, headaches, sinus infections, fatigue, acne, and thrush. The masks are dirty, they are full of bacteria, and are filthy. Teachers that I know have told me they are struggling because they can't tell how kids feel. It's difficult to bond with them from a distance and not seeing their faces. They can't understand them. The masks are filthy. There's more crying and refusing to do work. The kids are acting out behaviorally. Online teaching is frustrating and not effective for most of the kids, but especially not effective for grade school kids, and most parents could not pick up the slack and help their kids. Teachers are leaving the workforce, as I noted. Most of you know this information, and the students are afraid to tell you because they fear they will have to wear masks again and stay apart from people forever. I was actually told that again today. Humans are social beings and need physical, emotional, social, and spiritual experiences to grow and develop to their full potential. I thank you for your service, and I thank you for your consideration of not carrying through with the mask mandate.
Thank you, Dr. Gullicks. Lisa Breidenbach.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I am just a mom. I'm a Grand Forks resident. I don't have all the stats. But what I do know is the mask wearing makes me very upset. I drove past Century School in the spring when it was nice out, and I saw these children wearing masks in the playground, and I literally put my brakes on, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I had to, seriously, I was going to turn around because I didn't believe this was really happening in Grand Forks, North Dakota. It breaks my heart. My children are older. They've graduated. My oldest daughter has to wear masks because she's a server in Ohio. My youngest daughter, thank goodness, has not been forced to wear a mask at her job, and neither have I. If my children were in the public school system, I would have had removed them immediately because of the damages that I've been concerned about, and I would have homeschooled, and I would have made it happen financially somehow. I just know that as adults, it's our responsibility to protect our children, and that includes mask wearing, it includes the injections that are being promoted to keep everybody safe, and again, I'm just a normal person that doesn't have all the stats, but I'm just feeling the emotion of it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And I'm probably going to not pronounce this correctly, but Sonia Lesmeister, please correct me when you get up here.
I must applaud you for correct pronunciation because majority of people don't get it right. And I come from a different country, so I can speak from a little bit different perspective here. I have several things to address. I will start with the critical race. I want to just touch base a little bit on the race issue, period, or racism. It's been brought to my attention directly in middle school. I am very confused about the new definition or definitions of racism, and what's now considered racist just blows my mind because I don't even know how to respond to it anymore. And I feel that at some point the kids are not really being instructed, but rather being feared of what to say. And the teachers are, from what I've seen, afraid of instructing and rather cover their backs from the fear of having some legal action. And I say that coming from technically I'm a minority. I wasn't born here. I came here some time ago. But it's concerning to me. On the topic of mask wearing and the injections, I will speak to it as somebody who is certified in stress management and stress education. Mental health should be very, very concerning to us. The damage it has done over the past year is not negligible. I will not repeat the stats that the doctor has quoted, but the suicide rate increase is alarming, and it's affecting younger and younger children, girls and boys alike. I am very concerned about the health detriment to the mask wearing. We have gotten an email speaking about how the mask will not be mandated, if I'm not mistaken, for those who have received the injection. However, the injection has not been tested for safety yet. It's been only approved for emergency use. And as far as I'm concerned, the critical population at risk are not children. So this should not be even addressed in schools as far as the concern and well-being of the children. And I too am concerned about how it's being positioned and what we allow. If you get the injection, you get to do it. If you don't get the injection, you don't. I have 2 children who are both now in middle school, and I do not want for them to be subject to an experiment. I do not. And I don't believe that any of us should be requested or expected to subject our children to do that. If we choose to do it as parents, I think that's one thing, but it should not be brought up the way it has been brought up. My kids speak about it all the time. I feel like we're being bullied by media and by majority, and it's not substantiated by real science. When you look at what's happening, I don't think we're there yet. And I think all these issues should be addressed and how we will move forward, because there's a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty. I have friends who have chosen to use other methods of education and pull their kids out of school. And if this will continue the rate it is, I am prepared to do the same. I'm just saying that because mental health is very, very important to my children, and how they thrive and how they will be addressed going forward should be very important to us. I didn't have anything prepared. This is my first time being at the meeting, so I apologize. I don't have anything in writing, but I appreciate your time. I know you do not have an easy job, so I don't take it lightly, but I hope that you will take all of this into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Dr. Daniel Stanzalowski, please.
Good evening, school board members and Superintendent Brenner. I am Dr. Daniel Stanislawski, and I hold a PhD in molecular biology and biochemistry. I have been researching the scientific underpinnings of all aspects of COVID-19, including masking and the vaccines, since the very beginning, and it is now what I get to do full-time. I collect my research from highly respected peer-reviewed scientific journals such as Nature, Science, Cell, New England Journal of Medicine, and many, many more. It would, therefore, be absurd to call the information I present misinformation. Several months ago, my research was focused on face masking, about which I wrote a paper demonstrating unequivocally that face masks cannot and do not work and have the potential to cause harm. Since then, multiple studies and Dr. Jean Gullix have confirmed this. The current scientific topic du jour, however, is the COVID-19 vaccines. We keep hearing that the vaccines are safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. If only repeating the mantra made it so. The fact is, these shots are the most dangerous to ever hit the market. According to the government's vaccine injury tracking mechanism, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, or VAERS, we have seen over 9,000 deaths and more than 400,000 adverse reactions in the United States alone from the COVID injections. These totals are higher than the previous 30 years of vaccination data combined. One study concluded that the VAERS data on adverse reactions to the COVID inoculations are the result of these injections and are not from other causes. A Harvard study of VAERS efficacy conducted between 2007 and 2010 found that less than 1% of adverse vaccine reactions end up being reported to VAERS, and a new reporting system is needed. Please keep in mind that all these reports of injection injury are occurring while the clinical trials are ongoing and will be for more than a year, and are from shots that have merely obtained emergency use authorization for a non-existent emergency. The reason for such alarming numbers of injuries and death is the shots are not safe, period. There are multiple ways by which they can poison the human body. A novel mRNA mechanism is used that has never been studied in humans, and therefore no one knows its safety profile or the degradation kinetics of the novel mRNAs. The lipid nanoparticle shell contains ingredients known to cause severe allergic reactions. These threats, however, pale in comparison to the threat posed by the spike protein, and every brand of COVID shot causes the cells in your body to produce large amounts of the toxic spike protein. Studies have shown the spike protein by itself causes blood clotting. It crosses the blood-brain barrier to cause brain inflammation. It induces pathological cell signaling. It can bind to and disrupt tumor suppressor protein function. It is a prion protein that can seed other prion protein-associated neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, and more. Its receptor is highly expressed in the testes where pathological cell signaling may induce male infertility, and it has massive potential to cause autoimmunity. There is now a push to get younger and younger children to take these inoculations, and now hardly a day goes by without reports of teens losing their lives or being maimed by these noxious injections. While a few studies show children are susceptible to COVID-19, a great many reveal they are not. Certainly the death rate amongst children supports the latter observation. Inoculating our children against COVID-19 grants them zero benefit and may induce tremendous harm. The end of the last school year saw pop-up inoculation events occur in the city's high schools. I hope this did not occur under the auspices of the school board. The truth is, only the ignorant or malevolent support giving these most horrible of injections to any human, especially children. You now know the truth of the matter. You cannot in good conscience support any future push for COVID-19 vaccination of our youth. Please research what I have said for yourself, and thank you for your time.
Dr.
Thank you.
Lyon, can people indicate if they're a Grand Forks resident, and if not, where they're from?
Sure, and I can even do that. Everybody so far has been a Grand Forks resident except somebody from Thompson and may have a child in the school district. So, David Waterman, who's from Grand Forks.
Thank you, Dr. Brenner, school board members. I'm David Waterman, and I'm confident that none of you ever wake up in the morning and say, what can I do? What policy can we pass to bring harm to our children in the public schools in Grand Forks? I'm sure that none of you think about ways that you can cause their educational development to be retarded in any way. I don't think that happens. And yet that's exactly what the policies that have been instituted in the last year have done to our children, as you've heard from Dr. Gullix and others who've spoken. So the question that I have is exactly what are you planning to do for this upcoming fall? There will be a push, I'm sure, to have people wear masks if they're not vaccinated. There will be a push to impose other kinds of harmful restrictions on the children coming from whatever source it is, and you get to decide, are you going to harm the children or are you going to protect the children? Kids rarely get COVID, and they never spread COVID. They face far greater dangers every day in everyday life from a variety of sources, and we don't destroy their lives trying to prevent every bad thing that could possibly happen to them. So the question is, again, what will you do? And when will you begin assuring the parents and the students that they'll go back to school in the fall? It will look like a normal school year with no restrictions, no masking, no pressure to get a vaccine. We'll leave COVID behind in the dust because as far as the children are concerned, that's where it belongs. The most dangerous person in the world is the individual who has authority to harm those under his or her control and relinquishes their ability to think and reason things out for themselves, and to instead entrust their decision-making to someone above them, the World Health Organization, the CDC, Dr. Fauci, and therefore take no responsibility for any harm that may come to those under their authority. This has happened around the world for hundreds of years, and it always ends badly for the people. At the Nuremberg trials, the most common defense of those commanders, those Nazi commanders who were being tried for unspeakable horrors as they slaughtered men, women, and children was, I was just following orders. You can, for the sake of our children, do better. The CDC has reversed itself so many times, it's hard to know what their position on anything is from day to day. So I trust that you will do better in this upcoming year. I thank you for your service, and I brought a gift for those of you who doubt that what we've said about masks being ineffective. These, I have 6 Blu-ray discs with a 6-minute testimony from 2 experts on personal protective equipment. It's 6 minutes long. It's unmarked in a plain white envelope, so nobody will have to know what it is that you're looking at. And I will leave these wherever you would like me.
You can leave them with Mr. Berge down there, so. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
The last blue card I have is Aaron McSparron. And if anybody else wants to speak that hasn't filled out a blue card, if they could please fill out a blue card and give it to the lady in the back there, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Erin McSparron, and I'm a taxpayer, and I have worked in the medical field for 22 years. This is my first in-person attended school meeting, and like many in this room, I am here to take a stand and demand that we do better for our children. What is the purpose of government-run, taxpayer-paid education? Is it to teach reading, writing, and critical thinking? Yes, not fear, anxiety, and hypocrisy. The last year and a half have only taught the latter. The masks have been held up as the best method of protection when there is no data that proves that they have any benefit, and numerous studies with decades of application that prove their ineffectiveness and harm, especially when used on children. Young people are even more at risk of changes to their respiratory function and brain development due to their immature systems. They can have difficulty thinking, headaches, poor attention span, and more vulnerability to illness from wearing a mask, and all these are in addition to their known emotional harm. There have been pop-up vaccine clinics in the schools using peer pressure and ignorance to push blind acceptance of this experimental shot. Do you think that everyone that took the shot was given informed consent? Were they told that as of July 2nd, there have been 429,393 injuries and 9,048 deaths reported to the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System following people taking the COVID shot? Did you know that? 9,290 injuries and 12 deaths were to children 17 and under. So the children virtually no risk of from the virus. 9,290 of them had significant injuries and 12 died. They had no risk from the virus. What are we doing? Were they informed that if they already had COVID, that they were 2 to 3 times greater risk of having adverse events if they got the shot? How about that children are 50 times more likely to die from the COVID shot than the virus? What about the 1,796 cases of heart inflammation, some severe enough to cause lengthy hospital stays, restriction from any activity or sports? Ironically, the ones that maybe you've heard them too, they got the shot so that they could play sports, and now they can't even walk across the room for 6 months. They're put on restricted activity and they can't do anything. We are talking about bribing, coercing, and mandating that healthy people receive an unapproved, emergency use authorized experimental injection that, especially for the young, is all risk and no benefit. The damage that these restrictions have caused far outweigh any threat from COVID. This has become a physically, spiritually, and emotionally unsafe place for our children, and the repercussions are well documented. They have been made to unnecessarily feel that the world is dangerous. They are afraid of other people, creating an epidemic of anxiety, depression, and fear in our children that has led to increased mental illness and suicide attempts, and unfortunately, successes. For the sake of our children's well-being, we want all restrictions immediately removed for the upcoming school year. This includes masks, social distancing, temperature checks, plexiglass dividers, and contact tracing. And we want all extracurricular activities and classrooms returned to normal, the old normal, not some perverse new normal. Between the ridiculous acceptance of these restrictions, the teaching that one's skin color determines their worth or privilege, and the sexualizing of our children with twisted ideologies, it should be no surprise that homeschooling rates quadrupled in the country this last year. We weren't afraid of the virus, we were afraid of what you were calling education. The longer that you enforce these unhealthy restrictions and mind-numbing propaganda, the less students will remain in public schools. And if you do not change these policies and curriculum, you may have no students left to teach. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. I have no other blue cards, so if anybody else wanted to speak, please go back to Lindsay back there, but I see none. So let's move on to Superintendent's recommendations for discussions. Number A is school board meeting norms. Chris, do you want to go over that?
Thank you, Dr. Lund. Our norms are to be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public, speak up when the norms are not being followed, and advocate on behalf of students and keep the community in mind. This being our first meeting, I'll read the other two. Governance, lead by policy, serve as advocates for K-12 public education, entrust the day-to-day operations to the professionals, let the administrators do their work, assist community members and stakeholders in following the chain of command. And the two others are consider staff and district capacity and resources, and balance the meeting agendas so one meeting isn't heavier than the other.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 5B, which is referendum debriefing. There's a memorandum from Dr. Brenner on page 8. Dr. Brenner, did you have any opening comments?
Sure. My opening comments would basically come from the memo on page 8, as Dr. Lund referred to. And maybe just for our audience members who are here and in our viewing audience who don't have the memo in front of them. Superintendent, I've had the opportunity to publicly state through media outlets that I believe the $86 million referendum was too big of an ask, that the K-8 consolidation plan on the north end was not well received by the voters, and that coming out of a pandemic, including economic hardships on voters all played a role. Further, more community engagement is necessary with our buildings being more accessible by the public. This forthcoming school year will be an opportunity for two-way constructive conversations, dialogue, and feedback. Given the interest generated by both those who voted for or against the referendum and for or against the 10 mil building fund, I'm even more optimistic about our future as our constituents are paying attention and have shown a high level of engagement and mobilization. And again, I see tonight's conversation as an opportunity for the board to weigh in individually relative to your three big takeaways, maybe more, maybe fewer, and that will help frame our next steps as an administrative team and school board. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Brenner. Well, I'll open it up for comments from the board. Go ahead, Cynthia.
I didn't really want to be first, but I prepared some written comments to help guide me. So I would say for me, the biggest takeaways were around three areas. A robust communication plan needs to be developed and executed to get people in buildings with the main points delivered at every tour and event. And I think Dr. Brenner indicated that in his memo as well, that was something that he saw that we needed to be doing. And if you look further in our agenda, you'll see that we have now tours of the buildings prior to the meeting. So I think that will help. With that said, I think we do need to think about tours at various times, because 5 o'clock is often a time where people are just getting off work, and that's where the tours are. So I don't know if the tours were always tied, our school tours were tied to invitations to the public, but I think it is something, you know, we struggle to have community members come in and visit. Obviously, this past year was very different. And so, I mean, I think that we're all on board with that. That's my sense from Dr. Brenner's memo as well. With that, clear, consistent messaging. So I'm looking, while this is a debrief, I'm kind of thinking about the passing the 10 mil building fund and our attempts to try to do that again. So I think the two big questions for clear and consistent messaging will be, what will passing a 10 mil building fund do for our students and teachers? And what happens if the 10 mil building fund fails? So I don't think we did a great job answering what happens if this doesn't happen. And so that would be helping us with a message that's clear and consistent. Podcasts, videos, anything that's created needs to be easy to hear with clear, consistent messaging. And then my third, which I don't think is structural safety, functional aspect of buildings needs to be clearly articulated. So, the district, in my view, needs funding. So many of our meetings, we hear about a boiler that is broken, a leak that is happening, the air quality is a concern, windows are open, some kids are hot, some kids are cold in the same building. So somehow we need to show voters how schools are not adequately funded to repair all of those issues, so that we can repair those issues. Safety is an issue. I personally believe we need to make sure that our school entrances are designed in a safe way. We needed funding to be able to do that. The referendum would have helped with that and develop those safe entranceways. Space in general is a commodity. I really appreciated, and I'm not going to remember the name of a teacher, I meant to look that up, who wrote social worker counselor at Winship, just about providing, private spaces for social workers. The social worker, the counselor, the principal, the secretary are all right in that little hub, and needs, people need privacy. And mental health is definitely being addressed in that. So then I took it at a personal level. What did I do right personally? And I said, I answered any questions to people who asked me about the two referendums, or the referendum and the mill levy, as best as I could. I encouraged people I knew to vote yes, and why I felt that way. I encouraged them to look at the website, to go to the frequently asked questions. I use the frequently asked questions to answer questions. And yes, I posted a vote yes sign in my yard encouraging others to vote yes. Those are the things that I felt I did right. What did I do wrong personally? I stopped posting about the referendum except for a couple of times on social media. I got a little gun shy through this process myself. And I got discouraged. I got discouraged this time with the Vote No campaign, as I really couldn't understand how voting no would improve the schools, since funding is so badly needed. And I felt like I was on the defensive instead of being proactive. I also feel, after, again, listening to our norms, I feel I was breaking our norms and not serving as an advocate for students, for not being a little bit more proactive. So when I got the school board packet and saw that we were doing a referendum debriefing, I decided to reflect both broadly for the district, but I'm part of the school board, so I reflected personally as well, just a little bit. So I hope those are helpful.
Thank you, Cynthia. I think the tours that come before the school board it's open to the public, so they could, but it's not designed, I think, specific to look at facilities. I think those would have to probably be a separate type of tour. I agree with you there. So, other board members' thoughts, comments? Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. I agree with a lot of what Cynthia said, so I'm going to keep this fairly brief so I don't repeat things. One of the things that I recognize in this, and if you look across this nation, there's a debate going on, as we heard this evening, and I see some of the debate is very angry, very vicious, very ornery and personal, yet in Grand Forks, we have an engaged, caring community, yet it was mostly polite, and it was about the issue and not about personalities. And that, that's good to see. That's that North Dakota nice. We can disagree, but let's disagree without attacking one another. There's enough of that on this earth. I really appreciated seeing that. The other thing is, quite honestly, I was wrong. I really believed that the K-8, and this is me speaking for myself, the K-8 campus with a separation of students could happen. It was very evident by the vote that it was certainly not supported, and I was wrong. So what do? Let's get it right. And by getting it right, I think we're hearing some things this evening that is going to allow us to do that. We just need to get it right, because this is bottom line for the students of this great city. And the other thing that I would piggyback on is, I know we're going to have the discussion about the mills. We certainly have a lot of issues that are very, very pressing and very, very necessary. So I certainly would hope that if we should have an election in September, that we get 6% more, plus maybe 74% wouldn't be too bad, but let's get at least 6% more to get it to 60% so that we can do the right things and then move forth what it is that we need to do as a collective group. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Other comments from board members? Go ahead, Shannon.
So I like Cynthia, spent a good amount of time reflecting. So broadly speaking, I mean, one of the biggest lessons is, look, we're a community-owned asset. What the community wants, the community gets. Doesn't matter what any expert's going to tell us. If the community doesn't want it and we want it, doesn't matter. It's got to be explained to them. And if we can't come up with reasoned, logical explanations for why they should want it too, then I think we need to take a look at what we're proposing, because it doesn't make a lot of sense if we can't counter, what the community's clearly telling us they want and don't want. So, throughout the process, I've been kind of the minority voice at the table, and it hasn't been enjoyable. It's not what I get up to do every day. It's not why I got on the school board. I got on the school board to actually make a difference, not just be obstinate. And so, I hope moving forward that it's understood that when I'm here, I'm just reflecting what I'm hearing from the community and trying to impart that. So that was a big lesson. The other big lesson, I think, generally was exactly what Chris just mentioned, which is there was a vast disparity between those that voted in favor of the referendum and those that voted in favor of the mills. And I think that's a really important factor to point out. There is an underlying narrative that somehow this community does not want to fund schools. I don't think that's true at all. And I think that's evident from the vote for the mills. At 54%, you had a majority to pass it. It's just a slim margin. So I really hope that the morale can stay high and that teachers can feel that way and administrators can feel that way, that the community does want to step up and support schools, but it needs to be a reasoned approach to funding. And I think part of that is instilling some trust that we can make prudent investments and we can spend wisely to prove that. So it's something I said before we even voted. I think we needed to ask for a 5-year and a 10-year and lay it out. Here's what we want to do in 5 years. Here's what we want to do in 10 years. And we're asking for the 5 today. And when you see what we've done, we're going to come back and ask for the 10 in about 3-4 years. And get prepared. And be able to back it up. And then follow through and earn that trust. And then there won't be any questions about trust. There will still be questions about trust, but, fewer. The other thing in terms of the 5-year and 10-year, I think it needs to be driven by actual need. New things are important to some degree. Valley, we know, is in a state of disrepair that the cost to replace it is pretty much offset by what it would take to renovate the building. And at that point, you got to make the decision there. But then we need to take a look at our highest priority needs in the next 5 years, and we should be driving that by enrollment and what our experts are saying in terms of enrollment. To me, that's a sound approach, at least starting. We have expertise within the district to be able to do that. We don't need to hire it from outside. So the last kind of personal accountability thing is the consultant and the consulting services that keep coming to the table. Hindsight being 2020, I should have really asked myself, why are we hiring somebody who doesn't live within this community to engage with our community? Isn't that what we're here to do? I mean, certainly they can help us develop the strategy. How are we going to market this? How are we going to communicate this? What's effective? What's the timeline look like? But then the people who execute, shouldn't that be us? Shouldn't that be us engaging them before we even got to the table to decide what the scope was? Because really, we're the voice of the community, and our administrators are in part of that. I know we were all doing a heck of a lot more this last year with all of the, need within the district due to the pandemic and everything else going on. But I think going forward, we have to realize, community wants our ear and they want us to pay attention to them. They don't want somebody from the outside coming in. And we know them better than anybody. We live with them, we work with them, we play with them. So those are some of the things that I thought about.
Thank you, Shannon. Other board members' thoughts? Go ahead, Amber.
I have a couple that hopefully aren't duplicated. I think we did a really good job at starting the discussions early on. We were talking about it for quite some time and extended our sort of voting timeline. Part of that was due to COVID, but I think we did a good job at that, creating the task force with representatives from the community, I think was a very good positive. They did a lot of research, put a lot of time into it, some of which have continued involvement, and I hope will stay on to continue as we move forward with some of these discussions. But involving the community members in the conversation and bringing them into our buildings in a variety of ways too. So there were some community members that didn't want to raise taxes. There were some that didn't want to consolidate a school or whatnot. And so coming at us from a variety of different experiences and opinions, I think was really helpful. And going on what Shannon said, it speaks to the part of building what the community wants. And so I think a way that maybe we could improve, especially when we use the consultant this time around, is maybe doing some sort of polling. We've created engagement with some of the ESSER fund usage, and so maybe there's an opportunity to engage our community in polling and help drive what kind of what needs are the most important to our community members. I think certainly looking locally for a consultant, again, hindsight is going to be helpful. I think as a board, we had been getting a lot of flack from the JLG report and things like that. So at that time, we had looked elsewhere for a consultant, but really staying and trusting the locality of the consultants, I think, is a good job. We have an opportunity to do a better job with community engagement. Our plan all along before COVID hit was to open up the buildings and do a variety of public presentations and have conversations in the grocery stores and, where people linger and gather. But frankly, with stuff shut down, there just wasn't as much of that engagement piece happening. So I envision us doing a better job at having those community engagement sessions and really hearing from the public what they want. I also think that it's important to really identify and talk more about teaching and learning. I think sometimes these conversations got away from what was really most important in all of this is teaching and learning of our kids. And I think we need to talk about how infrastructure could help support that in some of these topics. So again, for instance, some of the special ed services, why that was important, not just for physical disabilities or learning disabilities, but how that could impact a child overall. That seemed to be such a small piece and got lost in some of the conversations. But even something like a K-8 campus, if the public didn't want that, how do we help them understand why that benefits teaching and learning, but also take that feedback and say, well, maybe it's not a K-8 campus, maybe it does need to be two separate buildings. I think the media piece, we did a good job at the end doing videos. The podcast was really good. But we can do a better job at doing that early on, engaging public testimony in teaching and learning. I think there needs to be more and a more robust communication platform with media. Sometimes the podcasts were hard to hear or difficult to hear. I think we could do more with videos. We could even potentially engage students to help us in a variety of ways, maybe through production or something like that, as a way to get them involved as a teaching and learning opportunity. I think that's it without duplicating anything else.
Thank you, Amber. Bill?
I think most people have probably said what I would say, but people I've talked to, I think they thought it was too big of an ask. There was too much in a package. And I think when people get confused over a large ask and they don't fully understand what's in the ask, they won't know, because that's a safe way to go. I think if we're going to move forward with asks, we need to keep them simple. And I just use a quick example. If we were going to talk about rebuilding Valley, I think that would be an individual ask by itself, and we can explain why and the needs that are there. So I think the more simpler we can keep it, the better we are.
Thank you, Bill. Go ahead, Amber.
Bill, you reminded me of something that I had heard from feedback. So I don't know if there's anything that we can do with this, but because of the amount of items included in the referendum ask, it wasn't reflected on the ballot language or the vote. And so I heard a lot of feedback actually for people just saying that they wanted to support it, but when they went to vote for it, the language that specifically was what they were voting for maybe didn't indicate exactly the breakdown or whatnot. And so, maybe as we move forward, having conversations about, do we tweak that somehow? Is there an opportunity to write that differently? Or if there's not, communicate why it has to be written a certain way.
Thank you. Jeff?
I agree with a lot of the others that spoke before me, and I won't belabor their points, but trust, as Shannon said, is one thing that I think we have to work on, where, if, like she said, if we can go and get an ask, prove that we can spend that wisely, and then go back again in 5 years, do another one, prove that we can do that. We're building trust that way. Communication, again, as everybody before me said, I think we missed on a couple points. So we got out there and we tried a little bit, but some of those events weren't attended very well. So how we communicated that out, and I don't know what we could have done different there, but it proves that we missed somewhere there. Agree with some others here too that it was too big of an ask. The 86 million, I think, was just a little bit too high for everybody to swallow for that. Some of the other comments I heard too about the building site specifically were the perceived traffic problems that could arise with two different entrances, trucks driving around with the cooks there. But I think that was going to end up moving in the end anyhow. But and another with the building site was taking a slice away from the University Park. I think there was some issues with that space there. And I guess one of the last thing was that people just like their neighborhood schools, and they're not ready to consolidate and drive their kids a little ways across town to put everybody in one big consolidated school.
Thank you, Jeff. Doug?
I think most things that I would say have already been stated. I mean, I do think we need to engage people earlier. I think we tried this last time with the facilities committee, and I think we found that that probably wasn't well enough known within the community, and we didn't get outside individuals within the community attending some of those, I think because of COVID. So I think we need to start that engagement process, both first to address the building fund and what we would use those building fund dollars for, but also start the process for what I believe is necessary come next June to go back for a referendum ask. But what that is, I don't know today, and that's why we have to start the engagement process again for that almost immediately at the same time we're going to be talking about the building fund and then how those are related and what they're going to do. Well, I think the community thought it was too big of an ask. I think what really is the case is that we didn't prove the need of that ask, because clearly the financial need within this district, as it relates to facilities as well as operating fund, are very significant. And that doesn't go away because the community thinks the ask is too high. We didn't give them enough evidence as to what is going to be the consequences and what are going to be the uses of those dollars. So I still think the ask is going to be significant again, but we'll find out from the community what their appetite is by having more of those conversations over the next 9 months.
Thank you, Doug. Chris, did you have, oh, go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah, I mean, it's been referenced, that ask was too big and this and that, and the number may have been too big, but I think what Doug hit on there is that the necessity of the ask was not justified, and that was something that was asked multiple times throughout the course, is how are we coming up with these numbers? And so I do think you need to be able to explain the need and the actual need, but I think, too, we all have to acknowledge that there was a huge outcry against consolidation, and I don't want that to get lost in the sight of, ooh, it was too big of a number. No, fundamentally, if that number had been asked for and it wasn't something that people were vehemently opposed to, I don't think you would have seen the show up to vote no. So I don't want to go sideways on that. I think that you have a neighborhood school characteristic in this community, across the entire community, that we've heard they don't want to shift away from. So there's alternatives. Consolidation is not the only answer, and we know that. Okay, it's been the idea for as long as I've lived in this community, and I think it needs to be put to bed for a period of time, and we got to focus on what we have and what we need to invest in, that we already have. I mean, we know the community is growing south. So, do we have bigger fish to fry than consolidation? I think so.
Thank you. Go ahead, Doug.
Just as a comment on that, one, consolidation was a big issue. I don't think we know exactly how big of an issue it was as compared to the dollar amount of the ask, which is greater, which is less. But, we don't necessarily have what I would consider neighborhood schools across the community. I mean, there's people whose kids go an awful long ways that they can't walk to school. They can't, right now, I mean, those that go to Kelly Elementary, they come from very far south of the district. So if we are totally going to buy into neighborhood schools, which I'm not opposed to, and not having consolidation, we have to have that full conversation, because that will be expensive as well. In addition to the needs that we have in buildings today, if we need to build another elementary school on the south end, that's going to be costly. If we need to build an elementary school on the west side of the interstate, that's going to be costly. So we should have that full discussion if that's what we want, because I've also heard from a number of people who don't necessarily buy into the neighborhood school concept. And that's not what they see, and that's not what they experience. So they're not necessarily in agreement with that. So I think we have to have the broader conversation and get that discussion starting to take place.
Thank you. The nice thing about chairing meetings is by the time it comes back to you to give your thoughts, everything has been said that could possibly be said. So I really have nothing else to offer myself. I think we've gotten a lot of good feedback tonight, and this is just the beginning of a process that we are going to be continuing for potentially years and beyond those of us that are sitting on the board today. It'll be future board members as well. So I appreciate everybody's input. Why don't we move on to item 6, the superintendent's recommendations for action. 6A is Finance Committee report, and Doug, I believe you have that. And there, it's on electronic pages 9 through 26. Thanks, Doug.
Okay, the first item from the Finance Committee is the business manager contract. That's for Mr. Scott Berge. It's a 2-year contract starting July 1st of this year and ending June 30th of 2023. The salary is identified for both each year, and it reflects the same increases that were for the directors, principals, so approximately 2.2% each year. The work week is 52 weeks. The other major change in the contract is the sick leave plan has been changed. We've adopted with this contract the model that we're using now for directors and principals, which is a little different model than what's been existing in the past. So that's reflected within this as well as some definitions of family illness, immediate family, those kinds of things have been modified to reflect what is within the teachers and the directors and principals agreements. There was some conversation about, where does this fit in within salaries? There was reference that there was a salary study done a couple years ago for directors, of which this was part of. The administration provided some information as to where we would rank with the business manager compensation amongst the large districts in the state. We come out in about the middle of that pack with the compensation. Now, that doesn't necessarily take into consideration years of experience, either as a business manager in a school district or within the private sector. So we also had some comment that we may want to have in the future the administration developed a little bit more information as relates to all these positions. What is the salary range? What is potential salary range in different bands? To get a little more information to know exactly where we're at and where we're headed. So are there any questions regarding the business manager contract?
Questions for Doug or anybody on Finance Committee? Seeing none,
I would move approval.
we have a motion by Doug. Do we have a second? Second by Bill. Any final thoughts or questions? Seeing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Go ahead, Doug.
Next is the Associate Superintendent of Secondary Education, and that's Catherine Galach. This reflects her change of title from assistant to associate, as taking over the role of Jody Thompson, who is really the second in command. That position is, and she will move into that position. That reflects, so the base salary the first year increased by approximately 4%, representing those changes, and then the second year contains the same kind of increase of 2.2% that was for the principals and the directors. And the assistant superintendent would come in. Now, on the information we had, it reflected what was the average salary of assistant superintendent was very high because of the reflection of the years that Jody had been here. So with this compensation, we'll be more, again, in the middle to lower end of the range of assistant superintendents. And this is also adopting the sick leave that directors and principals have, as well as the definition changes. Any questions?
Questions for Doug of the Finance Committee regarding this contract?
If not, I would move approval.
We have a motion by Doug. Do we have a second? We have a second by Cynthia. Any final questions? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Doug.
And then we have the contract for Amy Barch, who's the Chief Academic Officer. Again, this is a 2-year contract reflecting the same salary increases as directors and principals with the same changes for sick leave and definitions. And that position, we're I think the only district that calls this the Chief Academic Officer. There are others that have curriculum directors and those kind of titles. And in that case, we come in again in the middle to lower part of the range of the top 10 districts, largest districts in North Dakota. Question?
Questions about that contract for Doug or the committee? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
I'll move approval.
A motion from Doug, do we have a second? Second from Chris. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Back to you, Doug.
Okay, the last item is about school referendum timing and requirements. It's for, after the election, my mind started immediately as to, with the results, known results, what is that impact and what can we do to attempt to mitigate that impact? Because it does have an impact upon the district with the failure of both of those measures. And we still need to deal with some of those issues. So at Finance, we had the discussion. I had talked earlier with Scott Berge to get information, and he got it from legal counsel. What is the timelines? What is the availability of when we could have another election? And then we had some discussion about the timing of that election, and is it too soon or not? Based on state law, from one election to the next, 3 months have to pass. And for that to take place then, the earliest would be September 23rd, which happens to be a Wednesday. Also, if we want to have the ability of this, of a successful ballot election to be reflected for property taxes that would be assessed and paid in January, by February 15th, or by the due date, we have to have an election by October 1st. So those are kind of the guidelines we're looking. When is the soonest we could, and is there a deadline that really has an impact? And so that resulted in one Tuesday being available, and that's September 28th. So we had discussion as to whether the election is too soon after that, and would the community feel it's too soon, and that there should be a further delay. I think it was the overwhelming and unanimous vote of the committee that while it may be soon, the district's needs are such that we should take action as soon as we can. And the fact that a majority supported the 10 mil increase in the last election, even though we were short of the supermajority of 60% that the legislature has determined we need to meet, that it was worth taking it to the voters on September 28th. So at this point, I guess I would just open it up for discussion, as there's not a specific action that we need to take. If it is the consensus of the board to move forward, then that would come at the 26th of July meeting with the actual resolutions for the election to take place on September 28th. And again, it would be for the full 10 mil request that was on the June ballot.
Maybe we'll open it up to Finance Committee members first and see if anybody has other thoughts from the committee. I know Shannon, Amber, Bill, you're the other members. Any other comments beyond what Doug has said? Or not?
I guess the comment I would make, I've heard after it came out in the paper that I said we should wait a year. I've heard from a couple of people that said that were on the no committee that said it would be a good move, that there was support for the 10 mills to do that, and they tried to spread that, but it got spread to not quite 60%. So I guess I would support that if we go that way, and I think then it gives us time to put together that 5-year, 10-year plan of where we're going from them. And I think we do have people in-house. I think Chris could put that plan together for us with all the information that he has absorbed on that to move forward with that. So I would, I won't be here on the 26th, but I would support going forward with the 10 mills.
Just for clarity's sake, you mean Chris Arnold, not Chris Douthit.
We would hope so.
Shannon, Amber, do you have any other comments you want to make? Okay. Okay. I just wonder if Scott, could you maybe discuss the ramifications that if we do have a September 28th vote and the vote is no, when is the next opportunity after that? I just think the board members need to know that, the public needs to know that.
You were reading my mind there. That's what I was raising my hand for. So the caveat is with North Dakota Century Code, if you have two failed elections on the same general topic within a year, you have to wait. There has to be a full calendar year in between. Then, so so we would be looking at the June 22nd election that we just had as being kind of starting the clock on those 12 months of, if September 28th would not pass. And so if that were to be the case, the primary election next year, I believe, is June 14th. And so if the 10 mills is put to the vote on September 28th and fails, we would not be able to have that question on the June primary next year. It would have to be then a special election sometime after June 22nd of 2022.
Thank you for that. Other questions or comments from other board members? Cynthia, go ahead.
So my two questions would be, what will passing a 10 mil building fund do for our students and teachers? And what happens if it fails?
Well, I can start. I'm sure others can fill in as well. 10 mills, what that would do is generate roughly $2.5 million in property tax revenue annually, and that would be for the purposes, again, of a building fund. So it would allow dollars to come into the building fund and be utilized for various maintenance and construction type projects that we have. Of course, we have a lot of maintenance needs in virtually all of our campuses across our community, and so $2.5 million. It's not it's not the savior in as far as taking care of our deferred maintenance needs. It's certainly a dollar amount that allows for some significant improvements. But right now at the finance committee meeting last week, we were talking about concerns at the central pool, and costs there could be between $1 and $2 million for that alone. So so what this building fund mill levy would do is generate $2.5 million that over the last several years we've been utilizing general fund dollars to take care of shortfalls in our building fund, and that's a huge reason why our general fund balance at the end of the year has gone from $20 million down to right now in that $5 million range. As we spent $12 to $13 million out of the general fund the last 4 to 5 years that really are for expenditures that should not be coming out of the general fund. And when you look at building and sinking fund mill levies of other school districts, in Grand Forks, we've got a couple of mills tied to special assessments. So we're at 12 mills related to building and sinking fund mill levies. The next lowest district is Minot at 23.5, so they're virtually double where we're at. And then you look at Fargo's got 27.3 mills, Bismarck 32.8, West Fargo 53.98, and we're at 12 mills. And so that's a significant, we're significantly less, our tax levels specifically to building fund purposes are significantly less than all the other large districts. And that's a huge reason where we're at financially and where our buildings are at as far as the shape that they're in. It's been significantly less mill levies and significantly less funding for a large number of years.
Somebody want to answer the second part of the question, which is what happens if it fails?
I can talk about that, and really referencing the central high school pool, for example. If we are looking at potentially a $2 million figure for the needs that building has, it's close to I think built in the late '80s, so we're coming up on 35 plus years on that facility. We're weighing decisions on whether we can keep that facility open, or do we have to, find rent Hislop if that's an option? That's, something that needs to be discussed. That's a small scale project, and certainly I'm not diminishing the value of the swimming program. But if we have a failure in the HVAC system at Valley Middle School in January, we have 600 students displaced. What do we do there? Do we go back to after the flood when we had a split schedule? Some students went early in the morning to noon, and some went in the afternoon till 6 p.m. We're in the middle of weighing decisions that not only impact our facilities, but the ability of our students to learn and the ability of our teachers to teach.
Thank you. Shannon?
So Cynthia, to kind of boil some stuff down, I think, so what happens if it fails? Scott laid out, we can't bring it back up for another 12 months. So that's, in reality, that's what happens. What's going to happen, whether it passes or fails, we're going to have to go through a series of budget cutting. That's something that I'm sure Doug will get to after this discussion. So really, in essence, we just have to make the best of bad decisions in the next year, and if it fails, it's still the best of bad decisions we have to make in the next year. There's just probably more of them. From a what does this do for the teachers and students, one of the big things is I think it's going to help morale if the teachers and students can see the community come out and vote in favor of the mill increase, because they do have an understanding of the need and they do want to support schools. So I think that's a really important thing to have happen sooner rather than later. And I think it shows that as a board, we have, the appropriate amount of response to the needs that we see, and we're making a decision that, yeah, it's a risk that the community is not going to show up, but 55% of the vote says that they'll probably show up, and we're probably going to get that 60%. And I'd be willing to take that bet.
Other comments, clarifying questions from other board members? Jeff, Chris, got any thought? Okay. Go ahead, Doug.
I just, a little further on what are the consequences. This would provide about, over a 10-year period, about $25 million. It'd be a little more than that because the property values go up. We have needs in the district, and Chris Arnold has a spreadsheet that he maintains that probably show over the next 10 years, we have about $170 million worth of projects to deal with, that deal with maintenance issues as well as building modification issues, trying to deal with, equity, trying to deal with situation to provide, electrical in buildings, in rooms, that rooms that weren't designed for all the computers and all the things that take place. So what will happen if it doesn't pass? Well, then we have to be even more conservative with our general fund. And that means less money for operations, daily operations, because we have to keep some money in reserve to pay for those projects where something actually fails, and we might have to spend $1 million on a boiler right now. There's no delay. Those kind of things. And so if we have to be more conservative within the general fund budget, that impacts teachers, it impacts student learning. So it's very important that it pass so that we don't have to be quite maybe as conservative. I still think, as Shannon will I'll talk a little bit about the other thing that we talked about once we're done with this discussion. But we're talking about future budget cuts, and that what happens in September will probably have an impact on the size of those budget cuts. I think there'll still have to be budget cuts. It's just what will the size be and how much comfort level we have between the general fund and a building fund levy. So.
Any other board member comments? Melissa, you have anything you want to add? Okay. Well, the comments, I think we need to bring this back in 2 weeks for a more detailed discussion and decision. I certainly am under the consensus that we need to continue to bring this back in 2 weeks. Well, you want to move on to the next area, Doug?
Yeah, it's not a specific agenda item. We also discussed in the Finance Committee, starting the process. A year ago, there was discussion about that we needed to reduce the budget, the general fund budget by approximately 10%, which would be a little over $10 million. This last year, we reduced the budget by about 4%, about $4 million. So that leaves on the table discussion while we haven't finalized this year's budget, that actually will get tentative approval in August and final approval in October, we need to start the discussion of the 2022-2023 budget. And that's the primary reason for that is we need to get some community input. What are their thoughts? What are their are there programs that they're okay with? Are there sacred cow programs that we can't get rid of? What are issues out there? Because anything will impact what happens in the classroom. You can't cut $6 million without impacting the classroom. So hopefully we can minimize that. Hopefully we can figure out different ways by starting the process early and having some conversation about what that means, because part of it is, what are class sizes? What kind of staffing levels do we maintain within the classroom? What are compensation levels for teachers, principals, those kinds of things? How does that compare to other districts? Where do we want to be in comparison to other districts? Which is the most important? Being competitive and able to attract and retain, or we want the small class sizes instead? Or what's the proper balance that we can maintain so that we do have effective teaching and learning? And we need to start that conversation soon, and that was, I think, the general consensus, and that we'll be starting that process here in July, probably August, September, with that going along the same track as all this other conversation that we need to have with referendum and those kind of things. So it will be some difficult conversations, and part of the reason for getting it starting early as well is if the result is a cut in the budget and there needs to be a reduction in force, there are legal timelines that the North Dakota Century Code puts out there for us to have to follow. And so before the end of April, I believe, of next year, if we're having a reduction in force, we have to have identified, we have to have had the hearings and finalized all that. That's just the way it is from a legal perspective. It's not that we can sit and wait and see what happens in the June referendum or something else. We'll have a process, and we need to identify it so people are all aware and involved in the discussion, whether they're teachers, whether they're principals, whether they're community members. So we want to get that process started early. We didn't get started early enough last year, and that caused us some angst this last spring. So I want to avoid that at all costs, and hopefully we can avoid reduction in force, but some of that will depend upon what happens on September 28th if we have an election, and how comfortable we are with where the general fund balance is today.
Thank you, Doug. Why don't we move on to item 6B, which is a director's negotiated agreement. That's on electronic pages 27 through 39, and Jeff is going to guide us through this discussion.
The Grand Forks Directors Association and Directors Contract Bargaining Committee held 3 meetings, with the last one being on July 1st. It came to be that we agreed on a 2-year contract, and some of the changes were, a lot of the language changes were made to be compatible with the admin and principal contracts. Some of the other items were a sick leave buyout formula, and I think the max there is 10 days at 140 per day. Another item is we added steps 12 and 13 to the salary schedule. The other items are steps for experience and lane changes for credits will be honored, and finally, I think it was to be on par with the admin and principals. It's 2.2% for each year. So the Directors Contract Bargaining Committee recommends to approve a 2-year contract.
Questions, comments? See, we have a motion by Amber to approve the contract. Do we have a second? Second by Chris. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Jeff. Let's move on to item 6C, which is resolution to transfer 50% of special reserve fund balance to general fund. Scott?
Thank you. Memorandum is on page 40 of the board packet. In 2019, the Grand Forks School Board approved a $3 million special reserve fund, or $3 million for a special reserve fund. North Dakota Century Code allows for a transfer between the special reserve fund and the general fund. Specifically, I've put in the memorandum the North Dakota Century Code section that discusses if collections from taxes levied for the current budget are insufficient to meet the requirements of the budget for teachers' salaries, heat, light, and fuel. Majority of the school board may direct the school district business manager to draw on funds in the special reserve fund of the district. School board by resolution may withdraw without repayment 50% of the funds from the special reserve fund of the school district. And a year ago, the school board elected to move 50% of the special reserve balance at that point in time to the general fund. For the year ended June 30th of 2021, the Grand Forks Public School District number 1 met those requirements of Century Code to allow for the withdrawal of 50% of the special reserve fund balance. As of June 30th, 2021, a special reserve fund totaled $1,049,204.59. So 50% of that, the amount allowed to be transferred is $524,602.30. And that is the administrative recommendation. The resolution to transfer between funds is on the next page, page 41. Apologize, I adopted this 12th day of July 2021. The word July is not in that resolution, but that's the administrative recommendation is to transfer 50% of that special reserve balance to the general fund.
Questions for Scott regarding this issue? Got a motion by Amber to approve. We have a second by Cynthia. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Scott. Let's move on to item 6D, which is a consent agenda on pages 42 through 51. Do I have a motion? We have a motion by Bill. Do we have a second? Second by Doug. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 6E, which is policy review, pages 52 through 58. Cynthia, our fearless policy leader, will guide us through that. And maybe she wasn't aware with the look on her face right now.
We were in between that I wouldn't have to, but all right, so.
No, you have to. We haven't assigned anybody else.
And I checked that I wanted to be on policy still, so I don't know if I'll get that. Oh, okay. OneNote just opened on my computer. I have no idea. I never have used OneNote before. Hang on. So the two that, there are two that we looked at on June 14th, board meeting agenda and pre-meeting preparation, and these are second readings for the BCAA. So we would adopt that one, and then we need to rescind or amend early retirement policy, right?
Actually, the BCAA and 8509 are second readings. And then policy 4300, we have to rescind it as a policy permanently, so.
Yeah, thanks. So I'd make motion to accept second reading the BCAA and the 8509 citizen requests.
Do we have a second? We have a second by Jeff. Any questions or comments regarding the second reading of either of those policies?
It's really just a recap of how the meetings are going.
Seeing no questions, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. for no.
And then,
Motion carries, and go ahead, 4,300.
yep, motion to rescind 4,300, since it's replaced.
Do we have a second for the rescind? Second by Doug. Any questions or comments on that? Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor of rescinding policy 4,300, please state aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Cynthia. Let's move on to item 6F, which is designation of the official newspaper of the school district. Dr. Brenner, it's on page 59.
Pretty straightforward. Administrative recommendation is to designate the Grand Forks Herald as the official newspaper of the Grand Forks Public School District.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve and second by Jeff. Do we have any questions or clarifying comments about that? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to item 6G, which is designation of authorized representatives for title programs and grants. Dr. Brenner.
Again, page 60, you will see that the people listed below will carry the portfolio or portfolios for the following programs. Number 1, Title I. Number 2 is Title II, Part A. Number 3 is Title III. Number 4 is Title IV. Number 5 is Title VI-B, which is IDEA. That person will work along with our Special Education Executive Director. Number 6 is Title VII, and those will all be portfolios carried by Dr. Brenda Lewis. The next one is Impact Aid. Scott Berge takes the lead role on that. My name is attached to that as well. Number 8 is Title IX, and that's Lindsay Stodstead, who is our HR Director. And then you'll see the next 3 fall with Dr. Brenda Lewis, Indian Education Formula Grant, Johnson O'Malley, Head Start, and 21st Century Community Learning. And District Homeless Liaison, this is a change this year. We'll move from Jennifer Modine, who you just approved leaving the school district, and Sarah Munson, social worker, will carry that portfolio. The Literacy Grant, CLSD grant, will be carried by Amy Barch, our Chief Academic Officer. And finally, School Food Service will be with our new Child Nutrition Director, Wendy Mankey. Administrative recommendation is to approve the list as presented to you.
Questions, comments? Go ahead, Cynthia.
I do have a question. Which school is Sarah Munson at? Or, because, I mean, Jennifer Modine, if you recall, she just won one of our awards this year, was recognized. She's a terrific social worker who's left the district. So which school is Sarah Munson at?
With this coming school year, we're going to make Sarah's position full-time homeless liaison. That was part of the plan. If that has changed, I apologize, but before Mr. Thompson left, that was part of the plan, was to move the position that Ms. Modine was currently serving was a split position between homeless liaison and Winship, and that was being moved to full-time homeless because of the demands of the position. So Ms. Munson will be moving into that as a full-time position.
You have to find a replacement for somebody at Winship then?
Correct.
Other clarifying questions, comments?
Ms. Glatch, is that a grant-funded position, or will that be an additional line item for the operating fund?
I'm going to have to volley that question to Dr. Brenner. We were just talking about funding sources today.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that there are social work positions and portions of them that are funded through our title dollars. I'm not sure where those appropriations come specifically, however. I apologize for that.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm not able to handle the baton pass off either on that one, but we will make sure we communicate that.
Okay,
out to
thank you.
Maybe we'll have Mr. Thompson reach out to you, Amber, after the meeting. He might know. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the representatives? We have
So
a
moved.
Motion by Chris. Do we have a second? Okay, second by Doug. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 6H, which is the school board meeting schedule on pages 61 through 63. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really what I would like to take you through is page 62. And the only meetings that we're asking you to approve tonight would be the meetings that are scheduled on page 62. We also gave you information on page 63 that would outline prospective dates, not only for our city and base school board meetings, but also for committee meetings. So you could possibly get those on your calendar early. So we're not trying to create those schedules as the year goes, certainly subject to change, but nonetheless, we want you to have the first purview of that. So what we would be looking for is your approval for our meeting starting tonight, July 12th, running all the way through June 13th, and then having a placeholder for July 11th, 2022. And it's already been noted earlier this evening, we're planning on scheduling 5 p.m. tours at school sites, and then actually moving the physical school board meeting here. We know we have the capability to move all of our YouTube equipment to the school sites, but what we've learned in the past is some of the sound quality, some of the video quality isn't as good as when we have our conversations here. So, but given one board member mentioned tonight maybe that's not the static time that we always do the tours at 5, maybe we look at doing a hybrid, some of the tours before a meeting, some of the tours after some of the meetings. I just know we can't always predict the time that we're going to be out of here, and I don't know that you want to go to a school site at 9 or 9:30 or maybe even later than that. So that would be in front of you for discussion and hopefully for approval.
Board member discussion. Go ahead, Cynthia.
So that gets to Eric's comment when I brought that up, is that are these the way that people will learn about the buildings, or is there another plan to bring community in? Because, I mean, even I looked at this and went 5 o'clock building tour, then to get here at 6. Some people have to work till 5, and then they would potentially miss the building tour if they were interested.
I think it'll be a hybrid of a combination of both. We wouldn't expect everybody who's interested to come into our buildings at 5. We can certainly, in our planning process, set up after hours types of tours. And we really want our principals to focus on the needs of the building. And we do a pretty good job of celebrating success here at the boardroom, but we really need to demonstrate and show our public what the needs are at our campuses. So I would say it's a combination of both.
Shannon.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm the only board member who has a work obligation close to 5 most days, so I'm gonna miss every single one, because there's no way I can make it from west of the interstate to anywhere by 5 o'clock.
Other thoughts about the 5 o'clock time slot? I'm looking at the 2 retired guys, and I'm not sure why. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't make any difference, but, I mean, I guess, is 6 o'clock for the beginning of our meetings sacrosanct? Or could it move to 6:30 and we have tours at 5:30? And, if that works for those that have to work till 5. Thankfully, I don't have to anymore, so.
What do other people think about that before we let Dr. Brenner weigh in? Cynthia?
Well, one of the thoughts I had was very selfish, and that was eating. And so, even 5 to 5:30, you could grab something and eat it, or, eat it in the car if you're leaving your workplace at 5. So I like that idea, because I just do better with a little bit of food if we're going to go till 9, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. 10 o'clock is not a good hour for me.
We could give the school district kudos for a weight loss program for us if that, Dr. Brenner, what are your thoughts about? Oh, go ahead, Amber, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
I just wanted to say, first of all, I think the building tours are a great idea, because I think it's an opportunity for us. I would love to see our communication plan be enhanced, that we're having these building tours and that it's out in the open, that the public is invited to come with us on these tours. Perhaps there's a student leader in each building that could help lead some of those tours as well and give us a perspective of a student in those buildings. I know that 5 o'clock for me, I have a very flexible schedule, but with pickup and kids and things like that, that becomes a difficult time. However, I I think that I would certainly give grace to being there sometimes and not others, depending on schedules. But I do think it would be worthy to try to schedule some, and just if we schedule it at like a 7:30 that we have, or a 7, that we have a lighter agenda or something like that. I also think as a part of this scheduling, we've talked at various times that the Grand Forks City Council has their meetings starting at 5:30, and then we start at 6, and there's often times where there's maybe overlap or individuals want to attend either or both. And so I don't know that we're going to solve all the world's problems today and, scheduling that in conjunction with the City Council. But I think if you decide to push back or whatnot our meetings, it could impact, either positively or negatively, individuals being interested and engaged in attending both meetings. I certainly don't want to start meetings super late into the evening, but I think that's something that we should continue discussions about, whether it's a change in day of our meetings in conjunction with City Council, or we push them to change their meeting day. I don't know, but just another point that I wanted to reference.
Go ahead, Shannon.
So one of the other things that Amber just reminded me of is, it's not reflected anywhere on this meeting calendar, but we had like one joint meeting with the City Council, and that's something that I think, there's a lot of reference to stay in our lanes, we're individual jurisdictions, but I also think that's a really big mistake not to be engaging. And I know we have the quarterly meetings, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of additional invitation to understand what's happening and to share kind of the impact of what's happening on either side. So would have been nice to see a meeting or some attempt to get a coordinated meeting with City Council, because we did one, if I'm remembering right, in the last 3 years.
Yeah, we had several scheduled and got canceled by City Council in the last session around. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one thought I'm thinking is I'm quite flexible, but to your point, if we were to look aside Monday, one of the things I'm thinking about are the people with children. Those activities are typically Tuesdays, Thursdays, and I don't think we'd have a Friday meeting. And of course, Wednesday is typically a church evening. So I would believe we remain at Monday so people would have the ability to be with their families for activities. And then secondly, as far as the building tours, I would certainly appreciate earlier rather than later. As you said, Dr. Brenner, these meetings, we've been here some nights where we might want to, maybe have a sleepover, but we can't because that's against the law. We'd have our whole committee or our whole board here. So I would certainly support a 5:30 tour followed by a 6:30 meeting.
Go ahead, Dr. Brenner. I don't see any heads shaking or hands up, so thoughts that you have?
Yeah, we can certainly be flexible with that. I think maybe the important piece tonight might not be the time, but the dates, just so we can agree on the dates for the required meetings. And then we can come back on the 26th with a new schedule that has 5:30 tours, 6:30 meeting starting time.
Thoughts? Go ahead, Doug.
Just back on the other, that, being opposite of the City Council. I think they're the same second and fourth that we are. We could always do first and third Mondays. I know that's not necessarily the best all the time, but that's the other alternative to a different night is different weeks. But
Go ahead, Dr. Brenner.
Just wanted to note that I believe our policy says the second and fourth Monday, so we would just need to amend that.
And I think I would want some input from administration to find out if there's an issue with going to first and third from a business standpoint or something. There might be something that we in this room don't know about. So it's something that maybe you can bring back on the 26th. Shannon, did you have a comment? Oh, okay, I thought. Cynthia.
So is 6:30 too late then? Is that what people are worried about? I can handle something, myself, food-wise. So is that what the feeling is that 6:30 is too late?
You notice she looks at you two and me when she says that all the time. I don't think it's too late. 11:30, 12 o'clock is getting kind of late, but, but if we can keep the meetings moving along, I don't think 6:30 is too late.
And, it's in the interest of allowing people who work till 5 to get to the tour, so, the building tour.
I agree completely. So, does anybody want to make a motion that we at least approve the dates, and then we can tweak the time at the next meeting with input from administration?
So moved.
So moved. Oh.
So we have a motion by
Second.
Chris, and we have a second by Cynthia. Further questions or comments? So the motion would be to approve these dates, and then I assume the meetings where we don't have building tours, we'll still do 6 o'clock, and then Dr. Brenner and the team can bring back the other meeting dates when we have tours. Assuming a roll call vote, go ahead, Shannon, sorry.
So I thought, wait, I'm confused because Doug had just said, well, why can't, if we can amend the policy, we can do first and third instead of second and fourth. And then there was some discussion about going and checking to see if that was possible and then it coming back. Are we not doing that, or do we have to approve this tonight? I just want to make sure I'm understanding what that back and forth was.
I'll defer to you. I guess I was thinking we could approve it and we could always change it down the road as long as we change the policy. But would you prefer to have these dates locked in, or would you prefer to wait till the 26th and then decide if we can move to the first and third?
I'm just looking at Mr. Berge, wondering if we move it to the first and third, if there are any financial considerations for us as we prepare board packets.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, sometimes depending on when the third week of the month is, as far as timing of having financial statements ready. I know what we have scheduled here would coincide nicely with a finance committee meeting, to kind of line that up, following shortly after one of the board meetings on a different night. So, putting me on the spot, I can't think of anything specific, but there might be times where we'd be pushing it to have financials by the third week, depending on how, the third Monday could be as soon as the 15th or 16th or something, I suppose. And then the timing of a finance committee meeting, considering all the items that we have for discussion for potential budget reductions, school levies, a referendum potentially next June, et cetera. That's all I can think of right now.
You'd have to adjust a lot of the committees probably, because policy is kind of set up right now so that we meet between, and we'd have to adjust the weeks of those as well. Dr. Brenner?
Why don't we come back with a new draft? And if that new draft is, if the board would be agreeable to Monday and Wednesday, then we'll situate these other meetings so they fall in line to that. And then we'll also bring the policy forward in case that's the desire of the board. Then we'll just change the policy, have a reading on that.
Could you do one other quick thing and just check with City Council and make sure they're not switching to the first and third of the month before? Go ahead, Scott.
The city has committee of the whole meetings on the first and third Mondays, so that's not going to help us. So I don't, personally, I don't see moving to the first and third Mondays wouldn't, I don't think have an impact on, a night with a school board meeting and a city council meeting.
It appears they had a committee of the whole meeting today, but I wonder if that was just adjusted because of the holiday.
I believe it's fairly consistent when they do that, but we can check into that.
Given that information, do we all want to just wait until the 26th and come back still, even in spite of that?
I think double checking would be good, in my opinion, just so we don't lay down dates on our calendar and then have to.
Well, let's do that. We'll bring it back on the 26th, but please encourage you all to put on your calendars at least July, August, and September, so that you have it kind of blocked out now, because it'll probably stay the same, and then we'll come back, we'll have administration come back on the July 26th and for approval, and get that information in the meantime. Is that okay with the group? I see two heads shaking yes, and nobody's yet
Is
shaking.
there a motion and a second on the table? So does that need to be?
There is. Will you two withdraw your motions? Okay.
I will withdraw. I would just be reminded that I think what Dr. Berge, or Mr. Berge, I gave you a nice doctorate award there, what Mr. Berge has shared should certainly weigh heavily, particularly with the decision we'll be making.
You're okay with withdrawing your motion, Cynthia? Thank you. Okay, so we'll bring that back on July 26th. Thank you. Let's move on to item 7A, announcements. Dr. Brenner, do you have any announcements?
I just have one, and this occurred over the weekend at Ben Franklin Elementary School. We had some window damage done on the main office windows, which would be in the courtyard area, and the only way a person or persons could access the courtyard area would be via the roof. So we had our buildings and grounds people over there yesterday morning. I stopped over as well, and there was some damage done. So things have been boarded up temporarily, and we'll get those windows replaced. But the good news is all of the new replacement windows are fine. That's the good news. But that was the start of our Sunday yesterday.
Catherine, do you have any announcements? Dr. Lewis, any announcements from you? Do any board members have any announcements? Seeing none, let's move on to item, whatever it is, 7B. Board requests for future consideration. Do we have any board requests for future consideration from any board members? Seeing none, let's move on to item C, school board norms. Dr. Douthit, should we elevate you too? How did we do, Chris?
Please don't. That really has an odd sound to it.
How did we do, Chris?
I thought we did very well this evening.
Thank you. Well, we are adjourned, but we are rapidly moving into the annual meeting of the the building authority for School District 1, and I'll turn it back over to